maritime dispute with Chile. Morales is hopeful the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, will force Chile to negotiate access to the Pacific Ocean for his country. The court is scheduled to decide on the case on Monday. The current borders with Chile were established in a treaty back in 1904.
I'm confident there will be good news for the Bolivian people because we are bringing reason, truth, and we are looking for justice.
For more on the decision of the International Court of Justice at The Hague, we go to our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales.
There's a lot of optimism on the part of the Bolivian people as they wait for the decision by the International Court of Justice, which will take place on Monday on the maritime dispute presented by the Bolivian state against Chile 5 years ago. The decision is definitive and can't be appealed. President Evo Morales is at The Hague to receive the ruling, joined by former presidents, to show that Bolivia's access to the sea is a national demand. It's something that Bolivians have wanted for more than a century. In 1879, Chile invaded and took 120,000 square kilometers of the territory that allowed Bolivia to access to the Pacific Ocean, taking 400 kilometers of coastal line. More than 10 Chilean authorities in the past have promised to solve the issue. This call has been made to force Chile into a negotiation to resolve a matter in Bolivia. There will be a giant screens in the parks and public squares that will show the reading of the ruling starting at 9 a.m. local time.
That was Freddy Morales from Bolivia. More than 200 cities in Brazil demonstrated against the presidential candidacy of Jair Bolsonaro. In Sao Paulo, 500,000 people marched against the right-wing conservative candidate a week away from the elections.
Brazil saw one of the biggest mobilizations of its history. Women called for people to take to the streets to protest against far-right presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro, who's leading the polls.
We must defend democracy to fight against sexism and racism. These are not part of our diversity. Candidates like Bolsonaro are racist, fascist, and sexist. He said that if he is elected, he will not do anything to defend indigenous territories, that black people are useless, and that women will have to be paid less than men because they could get pregnant. We have to react now.
The massive event was led by the Workers' Party vice presidential candidate Manuela Dávila and Marina Silva, presidential candidate for the Sustainability Network Party.
The main objective of this event is to show that we will not accept a candidate that spreads hate against any minority. We are people from all kinds of political backgrounds. Each one has its own ideals, but we are here together to reject any type of negative behavior. We are not going to vote for a candidate like him.
At the end of the event, several women read a manifesto in response to the attacks of Bolsonaro and his neoliberal government program.
We are not going to vote for a fascist candidate. We are going to have a democratic process, not only through women's voting, but all of us who are part of this movement today, not only in Brazil, but also worldwide.
The organizers called for a new demonstration on October 7th, the day of the presidential election, using the polling stations across Brazil to say no to fascism.
And Brazilian women living abroad have also marched against Bolsonaro. In Mexico City, a group of women gathered to say no to the far-right candidate. They say Bolsonaro is the face of fascism and that he represents a threat against the rights of women and minorities.
It is an offense to women, to all social movements, to Afro communities, to the country, Latin America and the world. What this candidate says is an offense to everyone.
And hundreds of Brazilian women also gather in New York City against Bolsonaro. They say the candidate will be a tragedy for Brazil if he wins the elections. Demonstrations against Bolsonaro have taken place in more than 60 cities around the world.
It's a real danger for women, it's a real danger for the LGBTQ community, it's a real danger for African Brazilians, it's a real danger for indigenous people in Brazil, for all the minorities, and in that sense it's a real danger for Brazil's democracy, for Brazil, for the whole country of Brazil.
Meanwhile, thousands of supporters of Bolsonaro rallied in central Sao Paulo on Sunday. He is leading the polls with a projected 28% of the vote, followed by Haddad with 16% of the electorate. If no candidate secures a majority, the election will go to a runoff. The LGBTI community in Rio de Janeiro called for their members to go to the polls next Sunday. The march has been a call to vote for candidates that defend LGBTI rights. On this topic, Bolsonaro is feared for his homophobic views. These elections are also historic for them, as the number of LGBTI people who are running increased almost 400% in comparison with the previous ones.
Every year, politicians make promises, but they don't fulfill them. If they fulfilled them, we'd have toilets for transgender people and information for better understanding, training, so that we can interact better. Unfortunately, a lot of people in our group prostitute themselves because of a lack of employment.
I hope that the politicians who are running for office really bring good proposals for LGBT policies and that we can make a better world.
In other news, Venezuelans marched once again against the U.S. attempts to intervene in the country. Hundreds of citizens rallied in the city of Guarenas in the state of Miranda. They say they support the Bolivarian government despite the economic attacks that the country is suffering. They also made a call to the United Nations to take action against U.S. imperialism.
We want our homeland to be respected. That's the message we are sending to the world.
There's no humanitarian crisis here. That's what the U.S. is trying to create. We will continue supporting our president. Despite the crisis, we will fight for the revolution.
Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has criticized France for supporting a request to the International Court of Justice to investigate Venezuela. A group of countries sent a letter to the court asking for an investigation for alleged crimes against humanity. Venezuela says these countries, Argentina, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Paraguay, and Peru, are following orders from the United States aimed at forcing a change of government in the South American nation. Coming up, more stories. We'll be back. Welcome back. The presidential candidates for the FMLN in El Salvador have met with different sectors to gather proposals for their government plan. We have the details in this report.
48 citizen committees are working to analyze proposals to present the FMLN presidential candidates for the upcoming elections in 2019.
There is a need for more transparency. People want us to fight against corruption, no matter where it comes from. We are taking all of this into account in our government program, and that's what Hugo and Karina will include in their campaign across the country.
The program is divided into 9 main policies. Security, economic development, and sustainability are among them. Women, the youth, and children are a priority. Victims of the internal conflict also have a special place in the proposals.
We victims need to be listened to because we are important. We have suffered so much and we don't want to continue suffering. We don't want to be hidden because we have suffered terrible experiences that we don't want anyone to go through. We don't want the new generation to go through this suffering.
The citizen committees are currently sorting out the civilians' requests.
In the third stage of this initiative, we will analyze whether these proposals are viable. We need to consider the public budget and the priorities. We need to balance these two factors.
El Salvador will hold its presidential election on February 3, 2019. 4 political parties are running for office. If the FMLN wins, it will be its 3rd term in power.
Thousands of Nicaraguans marched in Managua on Saturday in a demonstration for work, justice, and a culture of reconciliation. Speaking at the event's rally, President Daniel Ortega called for peace and criticized the draft sanctions that the United States Congress is discussing, saying that the NICA Act will hurt the economy. The NICA Act is a bill that proposes conditions on international loans to Nicaragua and seeks to punish those seeking to do business with the Central American country. A government commission in Mexico has recognized that the Tlatelolco student massacre was a state crime. In October 1968, a student demonstration was violently repressed, leaving 30 people dead, according to official figures. But relatives and activists say the number of deadly victims is close to 400. Mexican President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador remembered the young people killed in this massacre.
50 years after the 1968 repression of the youth, in 3 days it will mark 50 years. Here on this historic square, on the Three Cultures Square, we make a commitment to never use, ever again, the army to repress the Mexican people.
Thousands of Argentinian women have taken to the streets once again in support of the abortion bill. Demonstrators say they will continue to fight for a law despite the fact that the bill was rejected by the Senate in August. They also say they blame senators for the deadly victims of backstreet abortions. It is estimated that 500,000 clandestine abortions are performed in Argentina every year. Around 100 women die for this reason, a quarter of them under 25 years old. Women also marched in Ecuador's capital, Quito, for the decriminalization of abortion, as they say this is a matter of public health. Since 2013, over 300 women have been sentenced for having an abortion. The law punished the person who practiced it with up to 3 years in prison and with up to 2 years for the woman who had the procedure.
It's unbelievable that still in the 21st century, men, the state, the church, and society in general want to keep on deciding over our bodies.
I think it is time for women to have control over their own bodies, so we have the freedom to choose if we want to be mothers or we don't. Stop criminalizing us. If we want to be mothers, the state has no right to decide over our lives.
And women in El Salvador also gathered to defend their right to access abortion. Abortion is criminalized with up to 30 years in jail, even in cases of miscarriage. Demonstrators went to the headquarters of the Conservative Party Arena, urging for a change on the legislation. These marches have taken place as part of the Global Day for Safe Abortion in Latin America and the Caribbean. Women rallied in countries across the region for the decriminalization of abortion and the right for a safe procedure. Latin American women face jail sentences for performing abortions, as most countries still have a restrictive policy on this practice. Now moving to Peru, where people have gathered to set a new Guinness World Record for the largest ensemble of cajon, a native percussion instrument. Hundreds of people attempted to break the record during the Peruvian Cajon Festival. Dancers, percussionists, and music lovers moved to the beats of the instrument. The cajon box was declared a national heritage back in 2001 by Peru's National Institute of Culture. Ecuador has announced the discovery of a new species of hummingbirds. A male blue-throated hummingbird was discovered near the Andean Mountains by ornithologist Francisco Sornosa. Bird experts at the National Institute of Biodiversity believe there are no more than 750 of them left. The number could even be lower than 500. We'll take one last short break, but stay with us.
Controversias aún más antiguas y complejas en el mundo han tenido soluciones prácticas y posibles, forjadas en una diplomacia creativa y eficaz. Bolivia y Chile, sus pueblos y sus gobiernos deben esperar con serenidad una decisión judicial que, más allá de sus aspectos formales, puede abrir un nuevo tiempo de paz, justicia y fraternidad. El mar no solo es una puerta al comercio, al mercado o a las transacciones modernas, sino es una ventana a otros pueblos y en sí a la vida misma.
Welcome back. The death toll in Indonesia's 7.5 magnitude earthquake has climbed to more than 800. Vice President Yusuf Kala said the final death toll in the north of Sulawesi Island could be in the thousands. The military has been deployed to help the search and the rescue teams. The earthquake struck Friday, sparking a tsunami that ripped apart the city's coastline.
I was carried by the wave about 50 meters. I couldn't hold anything. The water was spinning me around. There was a shop with bars over the front. I climbed it. That's where I was rested. Then a second wave came, even higher than the first one. Suddenly I was on the roof. Then I jumped onto the second floor of a building.
Macedonia has approved with 90% of the votes a referendum to rename the country to North Macedonia. But the referendum did not secure a 50% turnout needed to make it legally valid, only reaching 35%. The Prime Minister wants the parliament to change the country's name, but the opposition says the low voter turnout proves it's a mistake. This move could resolve a decades-old dispute with Greece that has blocked its membership bids for the European Union. Greece has a province called Macedonia and maintains that its northern neighbors and its name represent a claim on its territory.
The vote given on this referendum is final, and the will of the citizens is undisputed, and it has to be respected by all. In a democracy, the decisions are made by voting. I am congratulating everyone. Today we had a success for democracy and for European Macedonia.
A city in Palestine called Qalqilia is producing 15,000 tons of guava every year. This thanks to efforts by China-trained agricultural engineers. Training for guava farmers and an advanced irrigation method could prolong the cultivation period to December. This would help the food distribution system in the areas under Israeli occupation.
We would like to cooperate with China, which have made great progress in agriculture. We will certainly have significant progress both in field and quality. We provided some training for the guava farmers, such as advanced irrigation methods which could prolong the cultivation period to December. The efforts of training reflected on the production quality and cost. The field and quality has improved tremendously, while the cost of the farmers has been reduced.
More than 5,000 people attended a rally in Girona to demand that Spanish police forces leave Catalonia. Supporters of Catalonia's independence gathered in Plaza de Octubre to march towards the police station. They gathered on a stage and recounted their clashes with police on the day of the referendum a year ago. Demonstrators left ballot boxes next to a line of police to represent a wall against violence. Cameroon's President Paul Biya has vowed to use what he called a firm hand to restore peace in the English-speaking region of the country. He also told supporters at a campaign rally that dialogue is needed to overcome the violence in this region. Hundreds of civilians and dozens of security forces have been killed in the country's Anglophone northwest and southwest this year.
We obviously still have to restore peace in the northwest and southwest regions, which have been bruised by the abuses of the secessionists. By giving both regions all the satisfaction they are entitled to expect by protecting them against the excesses of their so-called liberators.
And Cameroon is preparing to host the upcoming 2019 African Cup of Nations. This was announced by the president of the country's football association. Concerns have been raised on whether Cameroon has the capacity to host the tournament, but a final decision on this matter will be made later this year. Either way, preparations continue. The tournament is set to kick off next June. This 32nd edition of the African Cup of Nations will be the largest, with 24 teams competing for the title.
We are absolutely sure that next year's tournament here in Cameroon will be one of the best ever organized competitions in history. We successfully hosted the Women's Nations Cup in 2016. I'm afraid whoever will host the tournament after Cameroon next year will have no option but to beat our standards.
Solar-powered cars have hit the roads in South Africa's Cape Province. The cars were taking part in the Sasol Solar Challenge, a competition taking place twice a year. Teams from across the world design and build solar-powered vehicles to drive across South Africa in an 8-day event. And dogs from all over the world have participated in a surf competition in the United States. Dogs of all shapes, sizes, breeds, and ages braved the waves, and they had some strong currents to deal with. This is the 10th edition of the event, which took place in Huntington Beach, California. While some of the canines just laid on their boards enjoying the breeze, some of them were able to stand with their 4 paws. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can find us on our website and on our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.